The Graystone Club had meant different things to different people across its 43 years, standing on the corner of Meridian and 16th in downtown Indianapolis. To the old families whose framed photographs lined the dining corridor, it was a place where agreements were sealed with a handshake, and a man's word still counted for something over a white tablecloth. To the newer members, most of them executives from the biotech corridor who had purchased their memberships rather than inherited them, it was a backdrop for photographs that needed to look a certain way. The marble at the front entrance had been polished so many times, it had lost the small natural variations that made it look like stone and had come to resemble something manufactured. Nobody who worked there remarked on this anymore. It had simply become the standard. On a gray Tuesday in November, Boyd Strickland drove his work truck around to the service alley on the east side of the building and parked between a catering van and a dumpster, whose lid had been left propped open against the cold. He was 36 years old, broad-shouldered from years of climbing through utility shafts and hauling conduit along his arms. His dark hair needed cutting. The canvas jacket he wore had his company name printed over the left chest pocket in letters that had faded from repeated washing. Strickland, Electrical. His jeans were the kind that had seen the inside of crawl spaces and electrical rooms in 6 different counties. His work boots, laced a little loose at the top, had a line of dried mud along the seam he had not gotten around to scraping off. He had been on a job until 9 the night before and back on one by 6 that morning. Beside him, in the passenger seat, Harper Strickland, 7 years old, and was pulling on her yellow knit hat. She wore it every day in cold weather. Her mother had told her once in the parking lot of a county fair that yellow was the easiest color to find in a crowd. Her mother had been gone 2 years now. Harper still wore the hat. Boyd had not meant to bring her today. His sister had been supposed to take Harper after school, but a water pipe had burst in her basement, and she had called him at noon, frantic, and he had laughed and told her he would figure it out. He always figured it out. He had picked Harper up from Greenfield Elementary, settled her into the truck with a granola bar and her stuffed beagle, a small worn animal she called Biscuit, because it was roughly the color of one, and driven to his last call of the day, the Graystone Club, which had a problem with a lighting circuit in its lower event corridor. The service entrance brought them through a narrow hall, past the laundry room and the kitchen loading dock. Boyd signed in at the maintenance desk, got his contractor badge, and was told by the young man behind the desk that the circuit panel was around the corner from the main lobby if he came through the side hall. He thanked him. Harper followed her father with Biscuit tucked under one arm and her yellow hat still on, looking at everything with the careful attention of a child who had spent a good portion of her 7 years in places she was not the intended audience for. The side hall opened at a narrow juncture near the coat check counter, just off the edge of the main entrance lobby. The lobby of the Graystone was not large, but it had been designed to feel significant. The ceiling went 2 stories up. The chandelier above the center of the room had been commissioned in 1981 by the club's founder and had never been replaced. Wingback chairs sat near a low marble table. The carpet was the color of burgundy wine. A display case along the east wall held framed photographs in chronological order and a small bronze plaque, Esther Quinn, founder 1927-2003. Boyd set his tool bag down near the hall juncture and checked the panel location against the paper he'd been given. Harper stood close to his leg and looked across the lobby. Then she went very still. A commotion had started near the front entrance, between the coat check counter and the wingback chairs. A woman Boyd had not noticed before was standing near the marble table, one hand resting on the back of a chair as if she needed it there to balance herself. She was small and old, with white hair pulled into a careful low bun. Her coat had once been camel-colored and had softened with age into something between tan and gray. Her shoes were plain brown flats, polished but worn down at the heels. Across one wrist hung a thin knit strap attached to a small cloth tote bag the color of slate. She did not look around with the ease of someone who belonged. She looked around with the careful, steady attention of a woman who had learned to take up only as much space as she absolutely had to. Standing 2 feet from her was a man in a black jacket with a security badge clipped to his lapel. Carl Gibbs, 43, had worked the Graystone's security desk for 7 years, and in that time he had learned that the safest way to hold on to his position was to respond quickly when management had already made up its mind. He had not put his hands on the woman yet. He was speaking to her in a low, patient voice, the kind of voice people use when they want to manage a situation without attracting attention, while doing something they would prefer no one see clearly. Standing a few feet behind Carl, near the entrance desk, was Kristen Boyle. She was 40 years old, haircut and a fitted charcoal blazer over a cream blouse. She had been the club's guest relations director for 14 months, recruited from a hospitality group in Atlanta to help the new ownership partners, in the language of their orientation memo, elevate the membership experience. She had taken this to mean, among other things, that the lobby should look a certain way at all times, and that certain visitors should not be allowed to linger. The woman in the old camel coat had come in from the cold 11 minutes earlier, stepped up to the entrance desk, and asked for the Quinn tribute luncheon. The desk associate, a new hire who was still slow with the check-in system, had told her to wait while she confirmed the registration. In the time it had taken the associate to navigate the screen, Kristen had walked over, assessed the woman in roughly 40 seconds, and decided she was in the wrong place. She had not checked the list herself. She had simply asked Carl to see the woman out. "Ma'am," Carl was saying now, with the particular firmness of someone carrying out an instruction he would not have given himself, "if your name isn't appearing in the confirmed guest list, I'm going to have to ask you to." "My name is Esther Quinn," the woman said. Her voice was soft and unhurried. It had the quality of a voice that had stopped needing to be loud a long time ago. "I attend this luncheon every year. My late husband's name is on that plaque on your east wall." Carl looked at the plaque. He looked at the woman. He had walked past that plaque every workday for 7 years, and had never thought much about who Edgar Quinn had been, beyond the name stamped into the brass. Kristen stepped forward. "Miss Quinn," she said, with the tone of someone granting a concession they were not entirely sure was deserved, "without a verified registration in our system, club policy doesn't allow me to permit you to remain in the lobby. We have a private event beginning shortly." "I know about the event," Esther said. "I helped fund it. My husband established an endowment for it the same year he opened this building." Kristen's expression did not shift. It was the expression of someone who had made a decision before the conversation began, and was simply completing the formality of it. "I understand you believe that," she said. "But our verification system this year requires confirmed digital registration. And if there's been an error, my granddaughter registered me. She confirmed it last Thursday by phone. You're welcome to step outside and call her to sort it out. We can't hold the lobby for unregistered visitors." Kristen looked at Carl. The look meant, "Move this along now." Carl placed his hand on Esther Quinn's elbow. Not roughly, not with any visible malice, but with the particular unhesitating certainty that made the gesture more diminishing than a rough one would have been, because it was so entirely sure of itself. The tote bag slipped from Esther's wrist. It hit the carpet and the clasp gave way. A small address book, a pocket calendar with a floral cover, a folded piece of paper, and a creased program from last year's luncheon slid out across the burgundy pile. Esther reached for them, and Carl's hand on her elbow kept her from getting down quickly enough. The luncheon program skittered 2 feet and disappeared under the edge of the marble table. Harper made a sound that was not quite a word. Boyd looked down at her. She had pressed her free hand flat against the front of her jacket and was watching the program slide under the table, with her face entirely changed from what it had been 30 seconds before. A moment ago, she had been looking up at the chandelier. Now she looked the way she had looked in the hospital waiting room 2 years ago, when the nurse had walked past them without stopping. She looked up at Boyd. "Daddy." Her voice was the one she used when she was trying very hard not to be upset in public, which meant she was more upset than usual. They made her drop her things. Boyd was already watching Carl's hand on Esther Quinn's elbow. He was watching the way her shoulders had curved inward slightly, the way old shoulders sometimes do when the body is absorbing something the mind has decided not to respond to out loud. He was watching Kristen glance toward the front entrance with the impatience of someone waiting for a process she had already set in motion to complete itself. He had seen that particular look before. Not in this lobby. In other rooms. The kind of look that calculated a person before it bothered to speak to them. Harper tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, aren't we supposed to help when someone drops something?" He did not answer immediately. He was running through what he knew about the room. He had no membership here. He was standing in the lobby on a contractor's badge. If this became a confrontation, it was going to resolve itself in a predictable direction, and that direction did not favor a man with mud on his boots who had come in through the service entrance. He thought about that. He thought about Harper, who was watching him make up his mind in real time. He thought about what his father had told him on the drive home from a job site. Years before, after Boyd had watched a foreman dress down a new hire in front of the whole crew without saying a word. His father had said that the person doing the cruelty was one problem, and the person who watched it and decided it wasn't, their concern, was a different problem. And in his experience, the second one was harder to live with. Harper said, quieter still, "She looks like Grandma Ruth." Boyd's mother, Ruth Strickland, had died of a stroke the previous February. Harper had visited her every Sunday for the 3 years before that. Harper knew, in the specific and unforgiving way children know things, exactly what it looked like when an old woman was trying to hold herself together while something was being done to her. Boyd set his tool bag down beside the wall and told Harper to stand next to the coat check counter where he could see her. She pressed Biscuit against her chest and went where he told her without another word. He walked across the lobby carpet and crouched down at the edge of the marble table, retrieved the luncheon program, and picked up the address book and pocket calendar, and folded paper from the floor, and held them out to Esther. Her fingers, when they brushed his, were trembling. Not from fear, he thought, but from the kind of steadiness that trembles when it has held still for too long. He asked her quietly whether she was all right. She told him yes. Her wrist, where Carl had held it, had gone a deep, clear pink beneath the skin. Boyd looked at Carl. He said 3 words, "Let her go." Carl's hand lifted. He scanned Boyd the way people scan someone they are trying to place. The faded jacket, the work badge, the boots, and his expression settled somewhere between uncertainty and mild irritation. Kristen stepped Boyd in a professionally measured tone that this was a private matter between the club and a visitor, and that she would need to ask him to return to whatever service work had brought him in today. Boyd said he would get back to the circuit panel in a few minutes. He asked her, without any heat in his voice, whether the woman had caused any disruption in the lobby. Kristen said the woman had been standing in the lobby without confirmed registration. Boyd asked whether standing in a lobby was something the Graystone Club considered a violation. Kristen said she didn't have time to debate club policy with a service contractor. The lobby had gone quiet. There were 8 or 9 people in or near it. A couple near the dining room doorway, a man in a vest with his phone lowered, 2 women by the elevator, who had turned very slightly toward the center of the room, with the particular body language of people paying close attention while pretending not to. On the far side of the coat check counter, Harper stood with her yellow hat and her stuffed beagle, and watched her father without blinking. Kristen made a small gesture toward Carl. Boyd stayed where he was. He said, in a voice that carried without being raised, that the woman had given them her name, and her name was on the plaque on the east wall 15 feet away, and no one had taken 60 seconds to look. He said that whatever it was a place like this believed it was protecting, it was not worth putting its hands on a woman in her 70s, who had done nothing but stand in a lobby and say who she was. The room absorbed that the way a room absorbs something it wasn't prepared to hear. A murmur moved through the small crowd. It was not loud, but it had direction. Kristen looked toward the dining corridor. Fiona Mercer, 44, the food and beverage director, had come out at the sound of voices and was hovering near the hallway entrance. Hank Dole, 37, the membership coordinator, had appeared behind the entrance desk and was looking at the screen with the focused expression of someone who has just noticed something he would prefer not to have noticed. Fiona said quietly that the luncheon was beginning in 20 minutes, and any extended disruption in the lobby reflected poorly on the event staff. Hank said carefully that he was seeing a registration discrepancy in the system. Boyd asked Hank whether he had actually pulled up the Quinn name. Hank looked at the screen again. He looked at it a second time. Something shifted in his face that he did not fully manage to contain. He stopped talking. Kristen, still composed, turned her attention fully back to Boyd. She told him his involvement was inappropriate for a service vendor, that she would be documenting the incident, and that his company would be hearing from the club's management. Boyd said she was welcome to make whatever calls she needed to make. He said that while she was doing that, she might also want to look at the registration screen herself, because the woman beside him had told them her name was on this building's founding plaque, and they had chosen not to believe her, based on what her coat looked like. The quiet that followed had weight to it. Then the elevator at the far end of the lobby opened. Celia Quinn was 31 years old, and had the look of someone who had already been in 3 meetings that morning, and had 3 more ahead of her. She wore a dark blazer and carried a thin leather folio under one arm. Her dark hair was pulled back in a way that suggested she had done it in a car. She was the managing trustee of the Edgar Quinn Memorial Foundation, a position she had taken formally at 28 when her grandmother's health had made the travel difficult. She had confirmed her grandmother's registration for this luncheon herself, by phone, the previous Thursday afternoon. She crossed the lobby and stopped when she saw Esther. She went to her grandmother first, before she said anything to anyone else. She put her arm around the older woman's shoulders and looked at the tote bag, and at the items Esther was holding, and at the faint tremor in her grandmother's hands, which Celia recognized as the thing that happened when Esther had been upset and was working to contain it. Then she looked at Kristen. She did not raise her voice. She asked simply what had happened. Kristen's recovery was practiced. She explained that there had been a registration discrepancy, and that the security team had been addressing it within standard protocol, and that a service contractor had inserted himself in a manner that was outside his purview. Celia looked at Carl. She asked whether he had been the one holding her grandmother's arm. Carl looked at the floor. Celia looked at Boyd. She took him in without rushing. The work jacket, the faded lettering, the mud on the boots, and then the small girl by the coat check counter with the yellow hat and the stuffed dog held against her chest. She asked Boyd to tell her what had happened from the beginning. He told her. Plain, in order, without decoration. He told her that Esther had said her name was on the plaque and that no one had checked. He told her that Carl's grip on Esther's elbow had caused the bag to fall. He told her what Kristen had said about the contractor badge. Celia listened until he stopped talking. Then she was quiet for a moment. She turned to Hank and asked him to read aloud the entry under Quinn from the registration screen. Hank read it. Esther Quinn, founding family guest, permanent annual courtesy registration, confirmed October 30th by Foundation trustee C. Quinn. The entry had been there all morning. Celia said, without inflection, that her grandmother had been registered at this event every year for 22 consecutive years. Fiona looked at the carpet. Hank had gone entirely still. Celia turned to Kristen. She said that the Edgar Quinn Memorial Luncheon was held at the Graystone, under an endowment agreement her grandfather had established in the same year the club opened, and that the endowment contributed over $40,000 annually to the club's arts programming fund. She said she was aware because she had personally reviewed the event file before coming today, that the foundation budget had underwritten the luncheon for the last 3 consecutive years, while the club's general membership account was in restructuring. She said she had been willing, until this afternoon, to continue the endowment agreement without alteration. Kristen opened her mouth. Celia did not slow down. She said that her grandmother had walked through the front door of this building every November for 22 years, wearing whatever she chose to wear, because her late husband had believed that a private club's purpose was to measure character rather than the label on a coat. She said that standard appeared to have changed. She said she would be recommending to the foundation board, at its next scheduled meeting, a full review of whether the endowment's continuation was appropriate. The club's general manager, a man named Aldridge, who had appeared in the dining corridor doorway and had been standing very still, stepped forward and said he would personally ensure the matter was addressed immediately and completely. He said it in the particular voice of someone who understands that what he is watching happen cannot be unwatched. He asked Kristen quietly to come with him to his office. Kristen walked in a straight line toward the corridor. She did not look at Esther. She did not look at Boyd. The sound of her heels on the section of marble floor where the carpet ended was the only sound in the building for 3 seconds. Then she was gone. Fiona followed Aldridge without being asked. Hank sat down behind the entrance desk and did not say anything for a long time. Celia stood beside her grandmother and watched the lobby settle back into its ordinary shape. After a moment she turned to Boyd. She said his name, which she had read from his contractor badge. She said that the Graystone Club employed a full-time security staff, a management team, and a guest relations department, and that none of them had stepped forward, and that he had, without a membership or a title or any particular stake in the outcome. Boyd said that he had not known who Esther was. Celia said she knew that. That was the part she was thanking him for. He said he had just known she was being hurt. Celia looked at him for a moment. Then she looked past him at the coat check counter, where Harper had been standing in the same spot the entire time, her yellow hat pushed back slightly on her head, biscuits still held firmly in both arms. She walked over and crouched down so she was at eye level with Harper and asked her name. Harper told her. Celia asked what the dog's name was and what kind of dog it was supposed to be. Harper said his name was Biscuit, and he was a beagle, and that he was very old, and her dad had sewn his ear back on twice because it kept coming loose. Celia smiled. It was the first time her expression had changed from the careful, contained look it had held since the elevator opened. Esther came and stood near the coat check counter then, and reached out and touched the edge of Harper's yellow hat, very gently with 2 fingers. She said it was a fine color for a hat. Harper considered that. She said her mom had told her that yellow was the easiest color to see in a crowd. She said it the way children say things that cost them something, plainly, and without asking for anything back from the person they're telling. Esther kept her fingers near the brim of the hat for a moment. She said that sounded like someone who had loved her very much. Harper looked at her father. Boyd was looking at his boots. He ran the back of one hand across his jaw and took a slow breath. He did not lift his head while she was watching him. They stayed until Esther was escorted through the dining room doors by 2 members of the waitstaff, who had been quietly briefed by Aldridge. The Quinn tribute luncheon began 9 minutes late and ran without further incident. Boyd finished the circuit panel work in the lower corridor in just under 40 minutes. Harper sat on the closed lid of his tool bag and did her spelling homework on the back of a blank work order sheet he gave her, writing in the wide deliberate block letters she favored. The lights in the corridor blinked twice and then held steady. 3 days later, Boyd received a call from a number he didn't recognize. It was the facilities manager for the Edgar Quinn Memorial Foundation, which oversaw 3 commercial properties in the Indianapolis metro area. She explained that the foundation had been looking for a licensed electrical contractor for ongoing maintenance work across all 3 sites, and that the name, Strickland Electrical, had come to the foundation's attention. She asked whether he would be available to come in and discuss the scope. He said yes. He brought Harper because it was a half day, and there was no one else, and she sat in the foundation office reception area with Biscuit in her lap, and read a library book about horses, while Boyd went over the contract terms with the facilities manager, and signed the preliminary letter of intent. The contract was larger than anything he had taken on before. He drove home with the window down a little even in the cold, the way he did when he needed the air. On the way, Harper asked him whether the lady with the nice voice had called, because he had helped the old woman at the club. He said he thought that might have been part of it. Harper was quiet for a block, then she said, "She had a plaque, Daddy, on the wall, with her husband's name." Boyd said yes. Harper thought about this while she buckled Biscuit's seatbelt strap, looping it through his middle the way she did every time, with the same unhurried care she gave all small things. "Did you know," she said, "when you went over to help her?" Boyd looked at the road for a moment. He thought about the lobby, the burgundy carpet, the chandelier that had not been replaced in 43 years. He thought about the way Esther Quinn had held herself up while Carl's hand was on her elbow, and her things were on the floor, and not one person in that room had moved. "No," he said. Harper turned and looked at him. The yellow hat was pushed back at its thinking angle, and her face had the settled, clear look it sometimes got, that made her seem briefly like a much older person, wearing a 7-year-old's expression. She turned back to the window. She said quietly, as if confirming something she had already worked out for herself, "That's why you went, though." Not a question. The way a child says something when she has already understood the answer, and only needs to say it aloud to make it real. Boyd reached over and adjusted the heat on the dashboard. Outside, the November light came in low and flat across the windshield. And somewhere in the bed of the truck, a wrench shifted with the motion of the turn, a small familiar sound that meant the end of one day and the start of whatever came after. In a city where certain rooms still measured a person by what they wore through the door, and who was listed in a system, an electrician with a work badge and mud on his boots, had crossed a lobby carpet and proved that dignity did not require a membership. It only required the willingness to be the one who moved when everyone else had decided to stay where they were. His daughter already understood that. She had understood it before he crossed the room. She had just been waiting to see if he did too.